This is a special Vote 2025 edition of Up Close, the race for New York City Mayor. A conversation with Zohran Mamdani.
We can afford to bring down the rent, have world-class public transit, and make it easier to raise a family.
1 year ago, back when he launched his campaign for mayor, very few New Yorkers knew who he was, let alone knew his name or how to pronounce it. Now, Zohran Mamdani is a household name in New York and around the nation.
I stand before you tonight as the nominee of a Democratic Party reinvigorated in its pursuit of making government work for everyone, not just the wealthy and the well-connected.
His politics and his style have energized many voters and polarized some others. But he remains focused on one goal, to become the 111th mayor of the city of New York.
I am wedded to the future of this city. This is a city that I love, a city that I grew up in, and a city that I want to grow old in, like each and every other New Yorker.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter. This morning, we continue our series of up-close specials on the candidates for mayor of New York City. Joining us this morning, the Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani. And great to see you here.
Thank you. Real pleasure to be back.
The last time we were here, we were at this studio and everything else the day after your victory.
Yes.
And what's different now about all this?
Wow, that day was a bit of a blur. That day was coming to terms with the fact that we had just won the Democratic primary in this city, and that, in fact, it was a margin that at that point was only going to grow to about 13 points. Today, we're on the brink of winning once again with just about over a week until Election Day. And It continues to be the same race, though, the same race to make the most expensive city in America affordable.
And how do you feel about what's happened since then and what may be happening in a week from tomorrow?
You know, I've been overjoyed by the fact that the coalition we had that day that we last spoke has only continued to grow. You know, at that time, I would have told you we had 52,000 volunteers. Today, we have more than 90,000. These are New Yorkers who have been knocking on doors across the 5 boroughs, phone banking people they've never met, all to further this agenda. And, you know, last night we had more than 10,000 New Yorkers come out to Forest Hill Stadium. And one of them was wearing a MAGA for Mamdani hat, a MAGA for Mamdani t-shirt.
Have you heard that before?
I hadn't heard it before. But that's the beauty of the general election, is you learn that caring about the affordability crisis, looking to actually make life that little bit easier for New Yorkers, it's not actually a partisan concern. It's one for each and every person. They include Republicans as well.
Uno mundo is what we have here in New York. 8.6 million people or so, give or take, and that's what it's about. Are you exhausted from all this? I mean, you're just a human being, right?
I am a human being. I do feel tired, but I can tell you is that I find energy in other New Yorkers, and I'm reinvigorated whenever I actually get to speak to them, and even more better than that, frankly, to listen to them.
All right, well, we want to talk to you about some of this stuff. Let's get into it. You're now 34 years old. Happy birthday, a couple weeks ago. You have framed this as a race between ideas and new ways to fix the city's problems versus what you're calling old school. In the last debate, Curtis Sliwa hit you very hard about experience, saying you have a resume that would fit in a napkin. Now, that's his words. Is he right or is he wrong? And can you describe a big project where, let's say, you managed a budget and had a team?
You know, I am proud of the experience that I have as a state assembly member, representing over 100,000 people in Western Queens. And in the time that I've served in the state assembly, I have won close to $500 million in debt relief for working class taxi drivers. We're talking about finally taking on a crisis that so many New Yorkers had known about, but so few politicians had done anything about it. And that required building a coalition, it required working closely with Senator Chuck Schumer, and even required going on a 15-day hunger strike. But at the end of it, we got the city to agree to a settlement that wiped nearly $500 million off of the backs of working class New Yorkers. And to me, that's the example of what government can do when it actually wants to help working people. That's my track record. That's exactly what I'll be doing.
You mentioned Mr. Schumer. Have you talked to him at all?
I've spoken with Senator Schumer a number of times, especially before this race and also during this race. And I'm looking forward to leading this city and to working with him to deliver for the people that we both represent.
Did you ask him for an endorsement?
I spoke to him about the importance of affordability in this city.
And an endorsement, maybe?
I focused more on the work at hand.
All right. Last week, you accused Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa of using Islamophobic rhetoric. You remember when that was. Yes. Governor Cuomo accused you of playing the victim and trying to divide the city. How did you respond then? How do you respond now?
I think it's important for New Yorkers to know what Andrew Cuomo actually said. Andrew Cuomo went on a radio show where the host said that I would be cheering another 9/11. Andrew Cuomo laughed and agreed. It has been many days since he did that, and he has yet to apologize. Naming that for what it is what New Yorkers deserve in their next leader, and then taking it on is what New Yorkers have been missing from their politics. And frankly, Muslim New Yorkers want what every other New Yorker wants and deserves: equality and respect. There are more than 1 million New Yorkers who are Muslim in this city. And to see a former governor stoop to such levels, to see him stand alongside Eric Adams as Eric Adams speaks about endorsing the former governor to stop Islamic extremists, to stop a movement that he says would burn churches. That is the kind of Islamophobia that has become so endemic in our politics that it is seen as a fact of life, and it cannot be any longer.
We have to stop that kind of behavior for all people.
Yes.
This is one big melting pot, right?
Yes.
For everyone.
For everyone. And I think that's what's so painful, is that growing up in this city, the thing that I was taught to love about this city was the fact that we came from everywhere, that people of all faiths, of all backgrounds, of all national origins could find themselves in this city and call themselves New Yorkers. And yet that's not the understanding we're seeing in our leaders.
So with that in mind, more than 1,000 rabbis have signed a letter against you. One rabbi of the Park Avenue Synagogue last week said in a sermon that you posed a danger to the New York Jewish community. How do you reassure them that you're going to be a mayor for everyone? Something you just talked about a second ago.
Absolutely. I'm going to be a mayor not just for those who vote for me, but for anyone who calls the city home. And one of the things that I've appreciated most in these last few months is building on the outreach we were doing in the primary and having more conversations with Jewish leaders, with rabbis, with elected officials, to speak about the importance of rooting out anti-Semitism across the 5 boroughs and the different ways in which you actually do so. Because there's far more talk about it and far less actual plans for how you will do anything about it. And so we have made clear that we're not just going to increase funding for hate crime prevention programming by 800%. We're not just going to ensure that NYPD continues to be outside of synagogues and temples on high holy days. We're also going to actually implement a curriculum called Hidden Voices that would celebrate the breadth and the beauty of Jewish life in our city's history. Because we have to both teach our young and ensure that we protect our old all at once in this city. And I'm looking to not just protect Jewish New Yorkers, but frankly, to celebrate them and to cherish them here in this city.
What kind of program is that? Did you start it?
Which one?
You said whatever you called it.
Hidden Voices?
Yeah, Hidden Voices.
That's an existing curriculum
Okay.
that just hasn't actually been implemented.
Yeah.
And this is the other part of it, is that in politics, there's a tendency to treat everything that came before you as something you got to throw out. There are a lot of great ideas that are already there in city government, in this city. They just haven't had someone with the political will to actually deliver on them. I'm looking forward to doing that.
And someone who says, I will do it with all people.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're saying?
And that is at the heart of our politics. Okay. We have to have a city where everyone knows they belong here. They have a mayor who is looking to lead and serve them, no matter their politics, no matter their thoughts about the mayor. We
did talk a little bit about passions in the race so far, and there are a lot of them. You talked about the 10,000 people this last weekend over at a rally for you. Mm-hmm. There are those who strongly support you, particularly young people, and there are those who oppose you. In a 3-way race, odds are that we could see you mayor elected with less than 50% of the vote. Less than 50% of the vote. If you were elected, how do you reach out to the people who are opposed to you? How do you bring them together?
I would continue to reach out to every New Yorker, no matter the margin of our victory, because what I'm looking to do is lead a city, as you said, of more than 8.5 million people. And I think part of this is delivering. You know, we have spent an entire year speaking about our plan to deliver affordability. The beauty of leading a city government is that you have the opportunity to actually get to work. And when you get to work, you can show New Yorkers that life can be more than this, that these are not just slogans. These are actually commitments of things that we mean, the things that we will do, and the things that will transform New Yorkers' ability to afford this city.
Okay, I want to ask you, have you listened to a question from a viewer. Before I start, do you want to be called Zohran or Mamdani?
You know,
because people call you all things, right?
People call me Zohran, people call me Mamdani.
As long as it's not late for dinner, right?
Yeah, as long as it's not late for dinner. I've also had people call me Kwame by my middle name.
Okay.
But the thing that I'm really hoping for is that people can call me mayor.
There you go. Okay. Before the next question, let's hear from a voter in the Bronx.
Please.
We've dealt with what? Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams all these years. So now it's time to get somebody that's for the city, that's for their constituents, and they actually have a plan to make the city better and to lower crime and not lie about it, not lie about the crime.
So what's your strategy for dealing with crime?
When you hear from a voter like that, it's many conversations that I've actually had with New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs crime and safety is a critical concern. And when you ask those New Yorkers where do they feel least safe, they oftentimes will tell you about public transit, about using our subway system. And we are the only campaign that has an innovative and new idea to deal with crime, to lower crime across the city. And it's been hailed by experts as state of the art, and this is to create the Department of Community Safety. This would mean that we would ensure that police officers could do police work and that we'd have mental health professionals responding to the mental health crisis.
Okay.
You know, in 2020, the police response time was a little less than 11 minutes. Today, it's closer to 16 minutes. Part of that is because we're asking officers to deal with 200,000 mental health calls a year. That is time they could otherwise be spending on homicides, on shootings, on so many of the things that give New Yorkers a real sense of fear about their city. Instead, we're asking them to perform the functions that city government should have been taking on a long time ago.
Very important, but it's complicated, all this, and I want to dive into a little bit about this. In 2020, like a lot of young people, angry over police attacks in this country, you described the NYPD, as we're quoting now, racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. You recently apologized for those comments. You did it to several people, in person and in general, many times and often directly to cops themselves, I'm told. How are you different now about police versus police nearly 6 years later?
You know, when I grew up in this city, I thought often about safety and justice. And I thought about that. I was learning about the history of our city, the Exonerated Five, learning about Sean Bell, learning about Eric Garner. And then in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, feeling as if the gap between safety and justice in my life had never been further, right here in our own city. And what I've learned since then, in becoming an assembly member and representing more than 100,000 New Yorkers in the state legislature, is that in order to deliver justice, you have to deliver safety as well. And learning that behind every headline, every caricature is just a New Yorker trying to do their best. And as you've said, I've appreciated the fact that in so many of these conversations I've been having, it's actually been with rank and file police officers who are putting their bodies on the line every single day to serve this city. And I'm looking forward to leading a city for them, as well as a city for the black and brown New Yorkers who've been victims of police brutality, to deliver these things in tandem.
Everyone in that bowl of
exactly.
that pot,
as you
that
said,
is New York.
All of us.
That's right. You have said that you would like to keep NYPD Commissioner Tisch if you're elected. Have you talked to her about this, and what did she say?
I've spoken to her in public. I've spoken to her on the phone once privately after the murder of Detective Diderol Islam. And in those conversations that we've had, and in the conversations she's also had with the city at large, it's always been clear to me that her focus is on delivering public safety. And that, to me, is what is the driving force in my decision, is she came into an NYPD that Eric Adams had stacked with corruption and incompetence. She started to root that corruption out, started to deliver accountability, and reduced crime across the 5 boroughs. That's exactly what we would build on under a Mamdani administration.
Okay. Governor Cuomo has proposed hiring 5,000 new cops, Sliwa 7,000 new cops to help expand the NYPD where it is. And it was not that many years ago. We had that many people. You have not proposed an increase in the force. So how do you lower crime, sir, without putting more cops on the street?
So I think we have the right number of police officers right now. I think we have to have them doing more police work. And that means that we do not have those same officers being tasked with connecting a homeless New Yorker with services that they require or responding to a mental health call. We need to ensure that we have mental health experts doing that work. That would free up officers to focus back on the issues of serious crime.
Don't you need a cop to go with someone who can help someone in panic?
You do not always. That is the
But sometimes you don't know that till you get there.
That is the judgment of a dispatcher. And I trust those dispatchers because they make those determinations today with 911 calls where they're ascertaining, is there a threat of violence in this scenario, or is this just someone who needs someone to be able to respond to their crisis?
Okay, let's move on to a subject where I understand you have talked a couple times about affordability.
Yes.
You recognize the word?
Yes.
It's a big part of your message.
First letter in
obviously.
the alphabet.
There you go. It has also been a problem for decades in this city. How do you make this city more affordable?
I think you listen to New Yorkers of how they're feeling the pain of this crisis right now. You know, when I ask New Yorkers what is the struggle that you're looking at, they would say cost of living. When I'd ask them how, they'd tell me housing, childcare, public transit, groceries. So you focus on exactly those sectors so that you can actually provide a more affordable life. There, as you said, 8.5 million people call this city home. Close to 2.5 million of them live in rent-stabilized apartments. The city has the power to freeze the rent for those apartments. The mayor has used that power to increase the rent by more than 12%. So one way that you make life more affordable is you freeze the rent for 4 years and you say the rent you're paying now is the rent you're going to pay next year. The second thing is, after housing, childcare is the next highest cost for New Yorkers. I mean, we're talking about $22,500 a year. It's more money to find childcare than it is to send that same kid 18 years later to CUNY. That's the state of affairs in this city. And what we saw with universal pre-K is city government can, in fact, take care of one of these needs, can take this pressure off the backs of working New Yorkers. Let's do it for children from 6 weeks to 5 years.
One way you've also talked about it is to lay out your plan to raise the city's 4.25% income tax. This is the top of the state, on top of the state income tax. And it's a tax that most cities do not have. You also want to raise taxes on businesses. The worry is that people and businesses could just leave this great city. So how do you convince them to stay?
I think first we'd be very specific. We're talking about raising personal income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers. These are New Yorkers who make $1 million a year or more, and raising it by 2%. The second is that for businesses, we're talking about the top rate of the state's top corporate tax. This is the most profitable businesses in New York State, and we'd match the tax of New Jersey. And the reason that it's important to do these things is this is what funds the agenda that would transform life for every New Yorker, including the ones that we were taxing. Yeah. Transform it by delivering on a quality of life that right now they're being denied.
From the early stages on, two of your biggest proposals, you know what they are, free buses, $30 an hour minimum wage, but the minimum wage is controlled by the state, and oh yes, MTA is also by the state and run by the state. How do you plan on delivering these proposals when you're the mayor, not in charge of the state?
You know, I look at the examples of what mayors who've had ambition have been able to accomplish. You look at Mayor Bloomberg. He was so committed to Hudson Yards and the extension of the 7 train to Hudson Yards that he paid for the construction of that subway station with city funds. It's a state responsibility. But that's what he did because of how much he was committed to that vision. There's the ability for us to actually be a part of the conversations around the MTA. And to do that requires you to actually care about the people of this city, because more than 1 million of them ride the buses every day. And that's why I think we're going to be able to deliver the funding in partnership with the state to actually ensure that we can make these buses fare-free.
You talked about Mr. Bloomberg. He was one of the people, business people that you've talked to. What was that like? Have you talked to him again?
I really appreciated the conversation that we had. It was one that focused on questions of how to deliver on the promises of a campaign, how to steward the city, and also the bureaucracy within city government and what management looks like within that structure. And I really have admired, for example, his bullpen approach, where he took what would typically be a private office and put himself right in the heart of that office environment. These are the kinds of things that are just as important as what you're talking about, because they determine if you can deliver on it.
Many corporations do what he did, putting everyone in a bullpen thing. That's really interesting. Now, a tough moment in the last debate I want to ask you about. You were asked about the 3 ballot measures pertaining to fast-tracking affordable housing. New Yorkers are answering these questions on their ballots, and you might do it as well when you go to the ballot.
I will.
So where do you stand on this?
You know, what I told New Yorkers in that debate, and what I'll tell you right now, is I've yet to make a decision on them. And I always want to be upfront and honest with New Yorkers about where I am on these questions. When I go to vote, I'll be making that decision. I'll be sharing it with New Yorkers, and I'm going to be planning on voting on Election Day.
Last week, we saw federal agents, including members of the Trump administration's ICE unit, do a raid in Chinatown, raiding undocumented workers who have been on the streets, many of them for years. If elected, what would you do in that kind of situation?
You know, I think the first thing is we have to make clear that this has nothing to do with public safety. If it had to do with public safety, Donald Trump would be sending in the National Guard to the 8 out of 10 states in this country that have the highest crime rates, but they're run by Republicans. So he has no interest in doing so. What I would actually do is deliver on the street vendor reform such that we wouldn't have a system that Eric Adams has presided over. Right now in New York City, the city is refusing to issue additional permits to ensure that New Yorkers can actually vent. What that leaves those New Yorkers doing is paying a middleman often more than $20,000 for the right to use their license. So when a New Yorker asks me, why is chicken and rice $10? I tell them, because city government is actually making it so. If we did the kind of work we need to do on the bureaucracy of city government, we could make that $10 halal $8.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to ask you about your parents and what you have learned from your parents about politics. You stay here?
I look forward to it.
Good, you got to stay here now because camera's on and you're not going to go anywhere.
I'm locked in.
That's when we come back with our conversation of mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. continuing our discussion with Zohran Mamdani, and I almost called you Zohran because I wanted to call it once during this interview. Let's talk about your family. Your father's a professor at Columbia University, and your mother a well-known movie director. Both of them are quite, and have been for a long time, quite interested in politics. What did your parents teach you about politics back when you were growing up here?
You know, one of the things I learned early on in life from my parents was that no matter what you think, if you care about politics, politics sure cares about you. And that's something I also taught given the history of my own family. You know, in 1972, my family was expelled from Uganda during the Indian expulsion done by Idi Amin, and they became refugees in London. And learning about the ways in which politics could change your life, it made me understand that politics was not just something that I would have, it's something that I also had to do. And I appreciated both that lesson and also the ways in which I'm looking to apply that lesson now.
And we heard Idi Amin again. We haven't heard that for a long time.
Yeah.
After the 9/11 attacks, you would have been about 10 years old. Is that my math right? Okay. Your father asked you, I love this story, your father asked you which of the 3 New York City jobs you should take after 9/11. A tough time for some people in this neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
A hot dog seller, a police officer, or a sanitation worker. That's a profound thing for well-educated people to ask their children and to say to them. Do you remember what you said? I suppose you do.
Yes, I said I'd be a sanitation worker.
Yeah.
And I'd been looking to clean up the city. And in many ways, I'm looking to still clean up the city, but just through our politics.
And how did they respond to that?
I think that there is a joy and an excitement. And I think that's the thing I've also appreciated from my parents is that no matter what it is that I've sought to pursue, they've always been there to support me. And I think even in running this race for mayor, no matter what the odds were at the beginning, you know, we were polling at 1% as recent as February, tied with someone else, quite literally, in the polls.
Whatever happened to someone else?
Yeah, you know, we don't hear much from him anymore.
I didn't think so.
I told you, we were coming for you, someone else.
There you go. If you're elected the 111th mayor of New York, you will be in office, if my facts are right, on January the 1st. Envision that for just a second and tell us, what might you do on your very first day?
You get right to work. And what I mean by that is that there's no time to learn on the job. Right now and over the next few months, that is the time to build your team such that you are ready to go. Because what New Yorkers deserve is a mayor who can understand the twin crises that are facing the city. The first is an authoritarian administration in Washington that is going to stop at nothing to try and spread chaos across these 5 boroughs, and the affordability crisis from within.
Couple of questions, real quick answers.
Please.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about you?
I think the biggest misconception is that I'm only looking to lead the New Yorkers who vote for me. I'm looking to lead every single New Yorker who calls this city home. That includes the 8.5 million people who live in every one of the 5 beautiful boroughs of this city.
And is there a fairest criticism about you?
Yes, it is that I cannot bench press.
That should be the worst thing that anyone ever can say, right?
Let me tell you, that 135 pounds was difficult.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you as someone who's a little older, it would still be difficult for some people. Favorite spot to be in New York City?
Outside. Just anywhere outside. It's lovely to actually get a chance to speak to New Yorkers. Some of my favorite places are just going to parks across the city.
So you must think of something else here when you're in a studio, right? Okay.
Lights shining. It's fun,
All right.
but it's not as good.
Last question.
Please.
The politician you would like to have dinner with and why, whether they are alive or not.
Well, last night I got to have dinner with Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez after our rally with more than 10,000 New Yorkers there. And it was just an honor to be one part of a larger movement that is looking to actually make this a country that working class people can afford, and to start that work right here in New York City so that we can do it for New Yorkers.
15 seconds left. What did they tell you about advice for this big battle you're under?
They were telling me to always remember who we're fighting for, because so much of the time we think about who we're fighting against, we lose sight of the reason we are in this work, and that is for working people. And that means ensuring that they can move around the city without fear that they'll have to deal with the National Guard. Also, move around the city without fear they'll be priced out of their home.
People know who you are, sir. Really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure.
And good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right. And on that note, we'll be right back. And we thank Zohran Mamdani for coming on the show. That's going to do it for this special edition of Up Close. We have posted this interview along with our other interviews with Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Siwa on ABC7 NY. And a reminder, early voting ends November the 2nd. Election day is November 4th. And on that note, thank you for watching. I'm Bill Ritter, and for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we wish you health and peace, and let's take care of each other.